Good evening, and welcome to the AJP Northeast Asia market close. Korea made history today. The KOSPI closed above 9,000 for the first time ever. But the very same chip trade that powered it left almost everything else in the region behind. One engine drove all three markets today: demand for artificial intelligence, memory, and the equipment that makes it. But that single engine produced three very different stories, sorted by how much of each market it actually touches. In Korea and Japan, a handful of giant chip names carried their indexes to records, while the broad market stalled or fell. In China, the headline index finished slightly lower, masking a furious rally underneath in two areas: Beijing treats as strategic homegrown AI chips and the critical metals it controls. The backdrop was supportive everywhere: an overnight memorandum to end the US-Iran conflict and reopen the Strait of Hormuz eased geopolitical risk, and a hawkish first meeting under the new Federal Reserve chair was simply shrugged off by the chip trade. Start with the flow, because that is the real headline. Foreign investors poured in, net buying roughly 1.7 trillion, won about $1.1 billion late in the session. And that wave is what pushed the KOSPI to its first ever close above 9,000, finishing around 9,060, up more than 2%. Domestic individuals and institutions were both net sellers into that strength. But look one level down and the rally is strikingly narrow. The smaller cap KOSDAQ fell nearly 3% on the very same day. The leadership was all memory. SK Hynix climbed around 6.5% to about 2 million. 685,000 won, roughly $1,760 after shipping 12-layer HBM4E samples to customers. Samsung Electronics rose around 4.5% to about 362,500 won, near $238, just days after unveiling its next-generation HBM4 memory. And the sharper tell was Samsung Electromechanics, up more than 8% to about 2,200,000 won, near $1,440. A component supplier riding the same AI demand, and the single best-performing theme on the board. Outside chips, battery names, small caps, and even some chip equipment stocks finished lower. China looked like the laggard, but the headline is misleading. The Shanghai Composite slipped, closing fractionally lower, around 4,090, with more stocks falling than rising. Yet beneath that flat surface ran a powerful two-headed rally in exactly what Beijing wants to own. The first head is homegrown silicon Cambricon. The closest thing China has to a domestic NVIDIA jumped more than 14% to about 1,510 yuan. The second head is strategic metals. China, tungsten, and high-tech rose, the daily limit of 10% to around 98 yuan, as tungsten and rare earths led every sector, a direct play on the export control leverage Beijing has built over critical minerals. Chip equipment names such as Jingsheng added to the move, up around 4%. So the red headline is not the chip and metal story failing. It is the rest of a broad, sleepy market sitting it out while capital concentrates in the strategic names. Japan extended its record run, the Nikkei 225 closing around 71,050, up about 1.6% to a fresh all-time high. The pattern was the same: narrow chip leadership. Tokyo Electron, the chip equipment giant, gave the index its single biggest lift, climbing nearly 5% to around 76,000 yen. Lasertech was a standout, up around 7% to about 56,000 yen. But notice the crack in the story. Advantest, the chip testing name, rose less than 1% even inside the AI trade. Money favored equipment over testing today. The currency stayed quiet, the yen flat in the upper 160s against the dollar after the Bank of Japan's rate increased to 1% last week, leaving the weak yen tailwind under the exporters intact. So, three markets, three records, or near records, all built on the same, increasingly narrow foundation. Korea and Japan are leaning on 5 or 6 chip names. China is leaning on chips and the metals that feed them. The honest question to carry into tomorrow is not whether the AI trade is real, it plainly is, but how much weight a handful of stocks can keep holding up, and what happens to everything they are leaving behind on the day that bid finally pauses. We'll be back tomorrow to see whether Korea can hold the 9,000 line into a weekly close, and whether China's strategic metals bid has staying power. If this briefing helps you track the region, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching AJP.